College students, graduates of Reddit, what's the craziest thing you ever witnessed in your dorm residence hall? NSFW. 2 things. Same dude. We had a guy whose room was at the end of the hall, so it had a little extra space next to his door. A little alcove. We had tour groups come through our dorm with prospective students and their families. Well, on one of those days he tore out a bunch of pics from his Playboys and posted them all over his door and on the walls outside his room. He took 3 chairs from the common room and put them outside his room as well. He then had a sign that said the Itches and Hoes waiting room. A mother went absolutely ballistic when she saw that. He got in too deep shit for it too. A few months later, when another tour group came through, our Bill, who was a total asshole, was giving kind of a speech to the high schoolers and their families. So our buddy fell out of his room and just his boxers and his hands tied behind his back with a sock in his mouth. He spit the sock out and started yelling, "Bill, untie me. This isn't funny." Our was humiliated. The parents went absolutely nuts over it. Our buddy was kicked out later that day. I was in RA. I had 8 residents trap a raccoon and bring it into their dorm to domesticate it. Guess what happens when you let a raccoon in the dorm? It ducks shit up. Lived in a 21-floor tower. Something like 1,600 students lived in it. 4 guys decided to have a jam session in an elevator and go up and down the building. Had drums, guitar, saxophone, and vocalist. I think every single floor wanted to dare them. One guy peed on a cookie sheet and let it freeze outside in winter. He took that frozen sheet of pee and slid it under another guy's door when he wasn't there. All the rooms in that dorm were carpeted. A guy I knew used to hook up with girls and then throw their clothes into the hall outside his room. Then lock them out of his room, making them get dressed in the hall in front of whomever was around. I think he works for Comcast now. Which fits. Boarding school here. MP3. Phones etc. were prohibited. But a few people, including me, still had them. One of them was caught and expelled and all the charging points were covered up. There was one uncovered socket left. But it was 18 feet above ground. And was for a big appliance. The solution we came up with was to steal stuff from the physics lab and make a voltage regulator. Then make 2 stacks of 3 people standing on top of each other. The top 2 guys worked the wires and got us a connection. 1 stack went up every day for almost a week before we were able to get a wire extender with a socket and get a permanent connection. It is still the craziest, most innovative thing that I have personally witnessed. So last winter in Boston there was about 102 of snow over the winter. Being college kids, we proceeded to build an igloo on the roof of our dorm and proceeded to hotbox it. Good times. The slip and slide we had on the ground floor was pretty epic, but probably not as epic as this one girl. For some reason she decided to duck 12 guys on her floor and turn the peephole backwards. Reverse peephole Seinfeld style for everyone to see. I'm fairly confident she didn't graduate. A guy that was wasted and tripping gonads went into the wrong room in the middle of the night and was thrown out of said room. Across the hall and through the wall into my old room. Turns out there had been a giant hole there that was cheaply patched up years ago. Otherwise there should have been no way he could have gone straight through the wall. It was a cold night. But my roommate and I pushed a dresser up to attempt to cover the hole until someone could fix it. Good times. My dorm had a secret Santa thing where your Santa would give you a task to do. And if you completed it, you get a gift. In the packed dining hall one night shortly before Christmas break, a huge, hairy, completely naked man jumps onto a table, tucks his junk between his legs, and screams, "Daddy only likes me when I'm a little girl." My roommate was his Santa. And as a reward for completing the task, she gave him a teddy bear wearing overalls. Guy down the hall was just nasty. Smelled bad. Slovenly. But very friendly. He never went to class. You might be thinking gamer. But nope, he was a day trader. Always told us about his wins losses for that day. Anyway, this was before mobile devices. and he hardly ever left his computer as a result. Traded in movements of pennies. So he had milk jugs to pee in. He told us proudly about how much time he saved by peeing in milk jugs. I presumed he dumped them out routinely. But the first time I caught sight of his room I learned the truth. It was as messy as you'd imagine. But then I saw the jugs. All over his room. The floor. Windowsill. Computer desk. My memory is hazy by now. But I'd say he had at least 21-gallon milk jugs full of piss in his room. To be fair, I couldn't verify that they were all actually full or just waiting in reserve. But at a glance at least some of them were clearly topped off. And honestly, how many gallons of piss is really acceptable to keep in your room? A bunch of guys in my hall collected some masks and dangerous looking items, pocket knives mostly. I think someone had a saw for some reason, and pretended to have tied a dude to a chair with a bag over his head, ketchup for fake blood and everything. They spent half the night on chat roulette with a sign that said tits or he dies. They didn't actually get any tits. But people's reactions were pretty great. That and the time one of the engineers dented a wall by firing a custom Nerf gun he'd built down the length of the hall are my only really crazy stories. One day I woke up to a sink sitting in the hallway. Like a sink that is built into a countertop or something. Someone must have just ripped a sink out of a countertop from a different building and put it in the hallway on the 4th floor. Freshman year I had a gay roommate. Let's call him Wally. We got along pretty well. We had different social circles but they overlapped a bit so we would hang out on occasion. Wally had game. Dude would bring guys back a fair amount and sexile me, but that was fine cause I did the same to him and that's just how it works, right? But eventually, he found a boyfriend. I figured that meant more sexiling for me. But oddly enough, Wally's boyfriend would stay over every now and then, but Wally would never text me to ask if I wouldn't mind bailing for a half hour or whatever. Then one fateful night, I awoke to the sound of a creaking bed. And there it was. Wally having butt sex with his boyfriend. Apparently they'd been banging while I was asleep for months. And being a relatively deep sleeper, I was none the wiser. But there it was. My very own Brokeback Mountain. Oh, did I mention that his boyfriend had the same name as me? And when I awoke to find Wally plowing him, Wally just happened to be moaning his boyfriend's name. My name? TL. Doctor, I woke to my roommate moaning my name while he gave to his boyfriend orgy style. I was a sophomore at University of Iowa. On the engineering dorm. The problem was that the main cafeteria of the campus was downstairs. So drunk people would get confused and wander to it even though it was closed. Then start having fun on other floors. It was Saturday night and pretty miserable outside, so most people were staying in. When we heard a scream. Then a loud crack. When we checked on it, there was nobody in the hallway. There was, however, a large smear of blood along the wall. And the exit sign was broken. One of the guys decided to investigate and found a huge guy in the bathroom. Bleeding from the face and drunk. Turns out he had the brilliant idea of running down the hallway, leaping into the air, and headbutting the exit sign. Edit, since a few Hawkeyes have asked. Yes, it was Birch. One time, my roommate and I hatched quails in our dorm room. We started out with growing plants, then breeding better fish. And from there we kind of escalated to birds. Ordered a cheap incubator and the eggs online. And kept it in the corner of our room without having any real hope that any of them would hatch. 3 of them did, somehow, and they lived in our dorm room for a whole year without our finding out. Helps that they only grow to be about 3 inches tall. Raw hair. Seen some shit. But the worst was when I was a freshman. I had this roommate. Mike. Mike was a sheethead. Came from money. Parents bought him a decently nice car at 16. He modified the sheet out of it. He thought he was the sheet and he could do anything he wanted. One night, Mike decides he's gonna get very drunk. Maybe take some pills. At some point during the night. For a reason we still don't know. He decided he did not like the plate glass window in the hallway of our dorm. So he dropped his shoulder and plowed into it. Spiderwebbed the entire thing. At some point later that night, he wanted to talk to some people we knew on a balcony down the hall. Instead of walking down the hall and into their room, he opened a window and had butted the screen out so he could lean out and yell at them. At some point later in the night he did coke and I woke up to a bunch of my sheet duct taped to the wall of our room. I lived on the 5th floor of a monstrous 6-story building. One night in February, the fire alarms went off at like 2 AM and the building was evacuated. No fire. No nothing. We all went back inside. The next Tuesday, the alarms went off at the same time. This time someone had taken out the fire extinguishers and thrown them from the top of the stairwells where they exploded when reaching the ground. Obviously, you can't use elevators in a fire situation and the stairwells were a disaster. It wasn't so much fun running through that. This type of thing then happened every Tuesday night for at least a month. They eventually caught the people when they tried to hit 2 dorms back to back. Edit, grammar. When my now husband was in college, the thermostat to the whole building was in his room. He discovered he could make the fire alarm go off simply by moving it 1 degree up. So he made the alarm go off at 2 AM. He did this 3 times. In his same suite. He had a roommate who once asked him to shave his head. My husband did not oblige. The guy left one day, never to return. After a month, the janitorial staff came in with shovels, literally, and shoveled out ungodly amounts of porn from his room. My roommate, a girl who lived across the hall, we will call her Sarah, and myself were sitting in the common room, which is situated right between the 2 dorm rooms, studying, chatting together. We were talking about place we'd traveled or something when the other girl's roommate comes down the stairs wrapped in a towel, presumably from having taken a shower, and into the common room. As she's walking toward the room, she casually says, "Hey Sarah, I'm going to bed now." Sarah says okay, and continues the conversation she was having with my roommate and I. Her roommate stops in her tracks and repeats, "I'm going to bed now." Sarah gets an embarrassed look on her face, gets up, and silently follows her roommate into the room and shuts the door. One of the RAs got fired, I can't remember why. He had a week to move out of his dorm room. And it coincided with Mother's Weekend. Lots of moms visiting campus. He decided to get a keg and invite a bunch of people over as a duck you to his bosses. His room was larger than most, since he was an RA. When they broke up the party, the people stumbling out were frat bros and drunk moms. And a couple of grandmothers. My college dorm experience was clearly devoid of truly creative types because the craziest thing I ever saw was the engineering students duct taping someone to the wall. I had some friends cut down a Christmas tree from campus somewhere and put it up in their dorm room. The only thing is, real Christmas trees are not allowed because they are a crazy fire hazard. They bought one of those things you would put a live plant in, a planter, some 90-degree brackets, and some screws and screwed the tree down. Then they built a false top and sprinkled dirt and rocks, again taken from campus, on it to make it look like the tree was planted in dirt. They convinced our RA that they had an uncle who had a tree farm and allowed them to dig up a real tree to use for the year. My absolute favorite part is that they returned the saw they used to Walmart. The 4-person suite across the hall from mine managed to spill beer on their beanbag chair. So they threw it in the shower to rinse it off. They forgot about it and flooded their bathroom and it leaked to the room below. I laughed about it for a while. It was the first or second weekend of moving into my freshman year dorm. People were in the floor lounge and everyone was sort of slyly drinking mixed drinks in cups or bottles to not let the RAs know what was going on. More and more people kept coming and it was getting a little crowded in the lounge, so everyone decided to go to the basement, which was like a dorm-wide lounge with pool and ping pong tables and what have you. Eventually everyone got really drunk high and there were probably at least 75 drunk freshmen in the basement. At some point someone discovered that the free condoms, oral dams, and lube were also located in the basement. That's when someone shut off most of the lights, brought down a stereo and made a lube slip and slide. It was probably the funnest night I had in college. Until the cops showed up and tackled like 6 people and everyone ran to their rooms screaming. TLDR, drummed lube slip and slide in the basement of my dorm. My college divided the dorms into houses, the idea being that you would do stuff with your house and form a community. The problem was that I already had a group of friends and this community was completely obnoxious. So I went to the first required meeting and then promptly did nothing with them ever again. Fast forward 2 months and 2 girls who lived down the hall run up to me and asked to take a picture with me, which I thought weird but sure. Turns out that it was so uncommon for people in my house to see me that I was an item in a photo scavenger hunt. Oh man. So many. I lived in the party dorm at a relatively party-y school. And some of the hockey players lived on our floor. I saw wonderful examples of humanity, such as a hockey bro cheating in the stairwell because he thought it was the bathroom. 2 hockey bros carrying a cheering girl, notably naked, back to their room and then railing her with the door wide open. Hockey bros punching and breaking the exit electronic light sign thing. This happened on 3 separate occasions. I have no idea why the university kept replacing them. A wasted hockey bro pissing all over his clothes with the door wide open. He was grinning in bliss the whole time. So many stories. One of my favorites is the kid that got suspended for repeatedly climbing along the outside of the dormitories dressed in full Spider-Man regalia. Everyone thought it was funny when he climbed from the 1st to the 2nd floor. But by the end of the week, he was climbing the 7th, 8th, etc. and the school was terrified they would be held liable if he died. The dorm director told him he would be removed from campus if it continued. And his response was, "I'm sorry. But with great power comes great responsibility." He was kicked out the next day after making it to the roof. I woke up in the middle of the night one night to the sounds of some very loud very HOI6. Confused and curious, I looked out of my peephole. Nothing outside, so I assumed it wasn't in the hall, but in a few moments I saw 3 people walk into the room across the hall in towels soaking wet. 2 guys and 1 girl. They were having a loud threesome in the communal showers. Lived in an engineering dorm once. Apparently the shower jerking was bad, as jizz water came up the drain.